Can you double check if the stream is live? Working? And if I change the window, does it work? Like that?
No, it doesn't change.
So I need to share another screen slot. Wait. You sure? You sure it's not changing? Wait. So if I open Android Studio, nothing changes?
So you probably have to use only one screen because I don't see it.
I mean, I click share, and what should I do? Yeah.
Select the screen and share. Click on share. Change it.
I see. Okay, I get it. But I can start with that one and then I will just change. Can you check if the lab is available in Moodle? Can you check if the lab is available? Are you staying in the stream all the time? I mean, you're not closing the program?
No, I'm not.
Can you please do the session to
What did you go?
Can you check the sample and then they'll message like there is no hold or something so it's because I think can pattern that your voice is very low on this thing, but on the video it's fine, so it should be fine.
When you can later on experiment how to use the microphone here.
Which one?
There's a microphone there.
Where is it? Like in that panel? Or
somewhere. So that use an HDMI. Then
on HCI, is using like the one that is plugged with the jack and it's like external one.
okay.
But then sir. All right, hi everybody. I think we can start now. Today is the second lab of the mobile computing class, and we will start with UI prototyping. Also, I will introduce you some key concepts that you will face with on every Android project you will deal later on. So, let me just change the windows. You created the project last time, so you can use the same project, or you can create another one. Starting from today's session, we will build, during the next 6 sessions, we will build an application, which is actually the part of your homework. And from every session, we will just work on the same project. I haven't created it yet, so I do. If you want, or if you haven't followed previous time, just once again, click File, New Project. Select empty activity. Here, first comes the name of the application. We will make a reminder application that reminds you to do something on the specific moment of time or place. So name can be any you want, and the language is Kotlin. Minimum API level 21 should be enough, and you click Finish. You mean, oh, I get it. All right. As Kennedy showed you last time, when you create, there are 2 classes created by default. First is XML class, which represents the user interface. And second one is the actual class of the activity. We will write a bit more code here, but first, which is a bit easier, we start with XML files. So the XML files is the visual skeleton of your activity. So all the views, which are buttons, images, text, are happening to be here. So, for example, you can see Hello World here, and if we go to text, we can see that there is a constraint layout as a parent, and there is a text view inside here. We can try to drag some, for example, button here. You can click button, you can select a button over here and just drag it. When you place it here, you need to make a connections, at least 1 to horizontal and 1 to vertical. Otherwise, it will just move to the left top corner here. So we create, let's make it center. If you drag it twice, it happens to be in the center. And for example, we want that button below the Hello World. So you make a connection to Hello World. It's here. And we can, for example, drag it to be a bit lower. If you open this, we see that it has to be to the bottom of the text view, and in the vertical, it's centered here. So it's same to end of parent and to start of parent, right? So here we see that it named button here, and you also can rename this here. For example, let's make it, I don't know, S button. So what comes next? If we want to do something with that button, we need to go to the code now, and we need to set up some click event to this button. And we do it like that. You open the main activity, and in on create, you need to set up a click listener for that button. You can do it simply by just repeating the name of the button. So it was named test button. So you write test button dot set on click listener. And then inside here, you can do whatever you want. For example, we can show, one more thing. I said it a bit earlier. There is a slide on the Moodle, and we will do this kind of application, which is reminder application. And just for your convenience, I have these codes where you have to copy and paste into your project. I will just a bit later explain what does it mean and where it goes. So you should open this. It's in Moodle, and just copy and paste it. So there are 2 Gradle files. You can find it here, Gradle scripts, one for project and one for application. These files are representing all the settings that are made on top of your applications. For example, in the application Gradle, there is libraries that helps you to use ready-made solutions into your application. So, for example, if you go to slides and you go to up level build Gradle, you need to copy this code. And you need to have it here. So you have to have apply application plugin, Kotlin Android plugin extension, and one more like Kotlin Capt. Another thing that interdependencies, you need to have this set of libraries. So you just copy them and you can replace those that are here. So here we connect the Kotlin library, we connect the Room library, which we will use later on. This is database library. We connect some design libraries and so on. So once you put it there, you click Sync Now. And the project starts to sync. There is an error here because I haven't copied this from project level Gradle. So copy this as well and put it into project build Gradle. So here for under build script, you have to have 3 lines instead of 1. So you put it here. Click try again if you have, or if you don't, just click sync. And we are done. So, yeah.
What was that Kotlin gap which you added? I didn't get what it was.
This one?
Yeah.
Yeah, we do connect the libraries that supports Kotlin because we will use, by default, Android Studio offers to use either Java or Kotlin. And if you want to use Kotlin, since Kotlin is a bit new, it was set up as default language in somewhere 2017 or 2016. But before, the Java was by default. So once you want to use Kotlin in your projects today, you need to connect these libraries to be supported by the Android Studio. So for here, we can, for example, have test button set on click listener, and here we can show some toast. I will show later on what toast mean, and we need to show some text. For example, mobile computing. So let's try to run it on your emulator. By the way, one technical thing. On the last session, we told you that we can borrow the phones. We have enough phones today. So for today's session and for to next session, it's fine to use the emulator. However, if you want to try to deal with actual smartphones, you can borrow it. And another thing, we found that some of you had problems with the laptops. You couldn't install the software or so. If you want, we can also to borrow a laptop. We don't have a lot, but if you need, we can help you with laptops as well. So we created a button here. Hello World was by default on the screen, but we added that button and something should happen when we click it. So let's try. We click and we see that message. Is everyone able to follow me, or there is some problems on the way? Can it? So then it was when you write once it is to the initial compile, this should be fine. But if something does anyone else has any problems or all good?
How did you do that layout? Did you make it in design view or the text?
Yeah, I can show you once again. Just yeah, but I doubt we'll so if you don't succeed to start, just that you need a laptop. We have enough time today, so if something is not working or you have some questions, just raise your hands and we will help.
Could you show the code again?
Yeah, sure. So you use the name of the XML like button that you used here in XML, dot set on click listener, and inside the curly brackets you write toast and the text of your toast. Yeah, there was a question how I made this UI. So as we told on the previous session, when you create, there are two, for like every activity is actually a screen that you see on your smartphone, and for every activity there are two files. One is Kotlin file that actually shows the code that happens, and one XML file that shows you the UI, the visual skeleton of the program. So on that file you can just use drag and drop of any views that you want. For example, I dragged and dropped already button, so I just take it, put it here. You need to, since we are using constant layout, you need to set up constraints, and that's it.
I did one project and I had a hello world text view. I tried to position it into the sensor, but I managed to do it with the visual design tool. So I have to have linear layout in the text.
Yeah. One thing that come to my mind where you couldn't do it, probably there were some problems with the Gradle, because you need to have the constraint layout in Gradle. For other reasons, we need to take the look. But all in all, how it looks, you drag and drop the button, so it appears here. And you need to put at least one horizontal and one vertical constraint, so the program will know like where this is actually located. So, for example, I have two constraints here and one to vertical line. So you can see here that in horizontal it's depends on the parent, and on vertical it depends on the parent as well. I have it here, and I have this margin top, which means how far away from the top of the parent it should be moved. For example, it's 188 here. You can modify it here. For example, you can make like 20. It goes here, or you can modify it in the code and make it, for example, 50. So it just moves. Both ways are fine. When you start to deal with Android Studio, it's always easier to use these attributes. Later on, if you want, if it's more convenient for you, you can use the textile editor. You don't need to drag and drop something, and you just write the code by yourself. Anyway, it's fine.
Okay, and Kotlin file.
Yep, sure. So I will remove this because we have already a button. Another thing, there is an ID line, which means the name of the button. So you name it whatever you want. We named it just test button. When you go to Kotlin file, you need to initialize this button. So it's the same name as in XML.
So you had already referenced.
Yeah. You click, you write test button, same as it named here, and apply and click listener here.
Yes, but I think we are using a library report anchor.
Yeah.
And with that anchor, you don't need to do initialize the button before you play it.
Yeah.
It's kind of, it has a smart way of looking at your XML and actually extracting all the IDs in there. So you have access to it actually.
Yep. In Java, before it was a bit more text. You had to initialize, use find view by ID, and then you could work with the initialized variable. Today in Kotlin, it's way more simpler. You just use the XML file, but if you use the Kotlin in your project, you need to add these dependencies into your project. So there are two Gradle files in the project, which are here, Gradle scripts, project build Gradle and application build Gradle. And inside here, you need to copy and paste these strings that are in the slides on the Moodle. So you can go to Moodle, you can find these slides there and just copy and paste it.
What is the name of the Gradle file?
Can you show?
Where exactly do you put project level code?
For project level code, on the top there is a line build script, and you should have on the very top there is build script, and there is just one line. You need to add two more lines. So all in all, it will be three versions: one for Kotlin, one for Anko, and one for Room. So Room is the database library. We will start using it from next or from the first lab. Anko is the extension of Kotlin that allows to make some handy things, for example, like using directly names of the XML files. And Kotlin is like the language itself. So once again, I would like to tell you some few things regarding the components of the application that you will face every time. Once again, build Gradle and project and application are those files where you include the libraries and you play with some other settings of the application. For example, later on you will change, if necessary, the minimum supported SDK. Because Android develops, like a system develops iteratively, and every year they make a new release. So at some point of time, they stop supporting on the previous devices. But if you want to make some support for older devices, you can change these numbers. You can find these numbers into documentation and depending on your devices. But I think all the devices that we have are quite new and level 24 and should be fine. And regarding the emulator that you have, you can set any SDK level you want, so it should be fine for your. Also, when the application goes to release, you can change the version codes and all this similar stuff. That's for Gradle. Another thing that makes sense when you develop the application is manifest files. Manifest is the, let's say, map of the application. It lists all the activities, all the services, all the broadcast receivers of your application. So here we see that we have one element named activity, and the name of itself, it's main activity. It's the main activity that it means when we open the application, we see this activity. For example, we have 10 activities, but only one can be main. And launcher is means that this activity opens when we click on the icon on the phone. This activity opens. So what we can do now, we can create another activity, and on button click, we can open that activity. So to create a new activity, you right click on the name of the folder. In my case, it's olo.reminder 2020. In your case, it will be the name of your folder. You do right click on this, select new activity. There are many activities here, and for example, if you click gallery, You can see that there are many for different purposes with navigation, with map, for login, for settings, whatever. We don't need that. We right click, new, and select empty activity. We can name it second activity, or it's better to name it, well, I can show to make it more understandable. I can show the slides. As I told, we will develop this kind of application for making reminders. Probably I can even show a demo right here. Let me cancel it first. So that's how it will look. We will have a button, and we will have here 2 more buttons. We will make the reminders depending on the time and reminders depending on the map. So in fact, we have 3 buttons here. If you click that button, another activity opens. You set up the time when you want to have the reminder to happen. You set up the date. You write some text here. Click create. Click create. All right, something wrong, demo effect, but still. The idea is to have this list of, when you click create, it changes back to main activity and shows you the entries here. So for that purpose, we would need 2 more activities. One is time activity and one is map activity. I guess something wrong with my emulator, yeah, but still. Go to your project once again. You create new, create activity, empty activity, and we can name it right now time activity. So the layout name will be the same. It replicates, it will be activity time and language is Kotlin. Click finish. And it's here. On the top, you can see that a part of main activity and main activity XML, we have now time activity and activity time XML. If you go to manifest, you see that before you had only main activity, now you have time activity. So all the activities that are created like that, new activity, blah, blah, they are automatically added to manifest. So you don't need to worry about that you missed include your activity or something like that. We can go to activity time now, and let's drag, for example, text view here. Make constraints. We can put it on the very center of the, and let's add some text here. So for example, second activity. We do not need to worry about ID for now because we do not need to apply any listeners here. That's enough for the second activity. But for the first activity, when we go here, we can change this to opening the actually new activity. So for that, we create start activity, intent. Let me see the hint. So yeah, that's how it looks. You select start activity, intent, then you need to intent put the context of the where you use, and you need to specify what activity has to be open. So in our case, we create a new intent. If you see highlighted right and you see click Alt Enter, just click Alt Enter, and it will add this to your import file. So here we need to specify the context. Context is the application context, is actually where the intent should work. And then you specify what activity has to be opened. In our case, it's time activity, double semicolon, class.java. And we can run it. It should be something wrong with my emulator, but let's see. All right, we have a button here, and when we click that button, a new activity opens. If you click back, you get back to the previous activity, and if you click this once again, it opens an activity. Is everyone following me, or there are some questions?
She will be
Yeah, sorry. So you do just call start activity, and inside the start activity, you create an intent. It can be, probably it will be simpler. It will be a bit simpler. You can create a new value named intent, and you create intent here. Same. So what we do here, we create a new value, which is actually the intent. And then when we use start activity, we put this value as a parameter. Or you can just make the simpler version and use it like that. Both version works. Probably this looks a bit more logic if you see it for the first time. Any questions for now?
I still get unresolved reference intent.
You mean like what does it mean, or?
Yeah, right.
When you are typing previously in Java, try to use the process of computing.
Questions? All good?
So what happens is that, for example, you have to just use the instance provided and also to be used. So as you are typing the instance, so it seems that if you want to know I normally don't type this outside to this. This is not here. No, to come back. It says that I need this power to
Let's repeat the task once again and create another activity. So right-click on the folder, new activity, empty activity, and now let's create another activity named time activity, or sorry, map activity. This will be used later on for creating the reminders depending on the location. So a map activity, layout name activity map, and you click finish. The Gradle starts to build. And once it's done, we see one more activity here and one more XML file here. If you check the manifests, map activity is here and time activity is here as well. Let's add one more button on main activity, which will open map activity now. So just drag the button, place it below previous button. Yep. Make it center. For first button, for example, we can rename it like as open time activity. For a second, we can, or let's just make it simpler. Just write time activity here. For a second button, we can name it map activity. And that's it. What we need to do then, we go to main activity. Oh, one more thing. We need to rename this button. So let's name it this button map. And for consistency, let's name as the first button instead of test button. Let's have it now button time. So you see, when you rename the button here, it asked me, because I used this reference that was before a test button, I renamed it and asked me, do I want to change the references in the code? Here it was before button test, but since I renamed it, it was renamed automatically. So let's create another click listener and another intent. So add button map, set on click listener. I can explain one more thing. Like when you create, there is a round brackets here, but I used curly brackets here. I can explain why. Before in Java, it was like that. You create a set on click listener, then you initialize on click listener. So that's how it should look. You create a new instance of view on click listener, which goes into the round brackets. But you can see that it's redundant constructor coming from back time from Java. And if we put here, click Alt Enter, it allows us to remove this. So if we remove this, we can see another highlighting that we do not need the round brackets as well. So instead, you can use just set on click listener, curly brackets, and you put all the codes here. So let's create another intent. And in that case, instead of time activity, we want to open map activity. So we write map activity plus Java. And we start activity with that intent. To let's open map activity and XML and add something here. So, for example, we can add text view here. And name it something like that. So let's try and see how it looks.
Can you show the platform there?
But yeah, sure. So for button time, we do the intent for time activity.
I mean, what does that IG view exclamation mark?
Yeah. When you create the, for example, set on click listener, you need to it requires you see that it requires view on click listener. It's the listener for the button, and the parent element of this is view. So, but we do not use it. As I told, for example, we can write it that way. So you see, it's view.onClickListener. This it's not in the code. It's just some hints from Android Studio. That means what actually goes inside that curly brackets. Yeah, it's not part of the code, so don't write it by yourself. Just set on click listener curly brackets, and then inside of the body you write that intent. You do not need to write this by yourself. You don't need to write this by yourself. That's quite enough. So for now we have activity which named main activity, and we have two buttons here. First is time activity. When we click here, it opens second activity, which is named time activity in our case. And if we click markup activity, it opens map activity. So actually that's all functionalities we need for today in terms of coding, but since we are making this kind of applications, I will also show you how to design and change the UI. So what this round small button, it's not actually the regular button. This kind of button named floating action button, and yeah.
How was that new activity creation? Just from mobile
well, you can create a file new activity, or you can create right click on the folder of like where your main activity is. You create right click here, new activity, empty activity. Yep. So this is not regular button. It's named floating action button, and it's a standardized way for, let's say, creating something new email, or you can use it in Twitter or wherever. So let's try to add this to our main activity. For this, we go to activity main.xml, and we drag and drop floating action button instead of regular button. We can place it somewhere on the bottom. And it asks for drawable element. So for default, you can use any of the provided by default, for example, launcher, round, whatever. So it creates a button here. And this button has an image element. And let's put it onto the bottom of the part. If you go to the code, you can see that before we had buttons. Now you have this element named floating action button, which looks different. It was provided by default design library by Android. And we can add margin here, which means that it's not stick to the very bottom and very right, but it adds margin of 16 density points around all the library, on the top, on the bottom, on the right, on the left. And it's named by default floating action button. We can rename it just FOB just to have it a bit shorter and easier to use. SRC compat is the thing that's used for icons, and I will show it a bit later how to change the icon, because for now you see it's not very beautiful looking. Let's add 2 more floating actions here. So just drag and drop, put it here, select some image. And let's rename it. So let's make one fob, another fob time, and the last fob map. So now regarding the code that we have done before, instead of using regular buttons that we had here, like time activity and the map activity, let's use these floating actions button, which are here. So let's put map list, like let's open map activity when we click on fob map, and time activity when we click on fob time. Let me just organize the buttons once again. So in our main activity.kotlin, instead of using button time on click listener, we can change this floating action button time and floating action button map to open map activity. So let's see how it looks. All right. For time activity, I haven't put the vertical alignment for that button, so you see that it's moved to the very top. To fix this, I need to go here. I need to select this, and I need to make a vertical constraint. Yeah, now it's good. So you see that if we click this button, it opens time activity. And if we click this button, it opens map activity. So we do not need this time activity and map activity old buttons anymore. You can just click on them, click delete, and it goes. Same for this one. Now we want to have these buttons 3 different. So we want to change these SRC compact elements. And we use, if we want to use some our own icons. So for example, you see here that I have the plus icon. If you go to the lab slides, there is a little bit on design. By the way, you can check the documentation on the slides that I have told before about interaction with interface, manifest, whatever. Here we have this link to material resources. If you open here, you can see that there are many, many icons over here. And we can select for any kind of icon you want. For example, we want something for represent the add-in button, the click one. So you can see that there are many of them. For example, we want that one. So you click this, and you can save it as in different formats like as PNG or SVG in different colors. So let's use SVG, let's use vectors graphic, because depending on the user screen, like there are small screens, there are big screens, and vectors graphic is just more suitable because it changes the size automatically. You don't need to care about different dimensions of the files. So we download SVG, and we need 2 more icons, one for map. So just write map here. You can select any kind of image you want. For example, that looks fine. So you click this, select icon, SVG, and one more for time. For example, let's stop on that one. So you download these files, and then we need to import these files into Android Studio. So I have it on my desktop. So how I add the resources into my project. So you go to res, drawable, and here you right-click on the folder, select new, and since we're using vector images, select vector asset. It allows you to use predefined clip arts or the files that has been on our computer. So select local files, select the path. It allows you to go any folder of your computer. If you click this, it goes to desktop, and select, for example, add. So you see it's icon, add, and we can remove this, for example. You don't need that. Click next, and it's here. I can even, I think I did it wrong, and let's have it just icon underscore add. So here, instead of this icon for floating action button that we have not time or map, but just floating action button, for SRC compacts, we can use drawable icon add. And it's here. Is everyone able to follow? No questions? Okay, let's repeat once again. So you right-click on drawable folder, go to new, vector asset, and you select another one. So for example, time. Yeah.
Is there some instructions on what to do if I don't get this name so that I can.
At what step you have stopped? Well, we do have slides. You can follow the slides on Moodle, but on what step you are now? I can show once again if something unclear.
Okay, but it's not that this is so hard, but so it was like how many activities
we do have 3 activity for now.
okay.
Main activity, map activity, and time activity. For that purpose, we have 2 buttons here. One opens time activity, one opens map activity. Instead of regular buttons, we now use floating actions button, which are here. And in main activity, we have 2 listeners, one for time that opens time activity, and one for map that opens map activity. And what we do now, we just change these icons. Instead of have regular icons, we want to have some custom, and I show how to improve the robots. So let's do it once again. New vector asset and map. I think we have it different, but anyway. So we do have icon map here. And once more, vector asset time. Let's make it just icon time. So now we can change the corresponding images. On floating action button time, let's put it drawable IC time. And for map, let's use drawable IC map. So you see here we have 3 different icons here. Another thing, so we imported these buttons, and you see that's it's just XML files because vector files are represented as XML files, and you see that there is an element path here, and there is a color. So we can change the color. You have seen that it's black. It will be more readable if we have it in white. So you can just click here and change the color.
I will every activity. Are they empty activities or?
Yeah, empty activity.
Okay.
So if you see here, it's not refreshed, but still, we can run it on emulator, and let's see how it works. Yeah. So you see now we have 3 buttons, and we have different images onto them. Is anyone following me? Any questions? Comments? So yeah, if you, so these are 3 empty activities. It's good. And now we added 3 floating actions buttons instead of regular button.
Yeah.
So you can use this button. You can go to project. And select so we have 3, so I'll do it twice more. Drop this.
So now go to text. Show you the XML.
So we have renamed these buttons to floating action button time, and floating action map. And you can organize them to be in the button by just setting constraints.
Yeah, thanks. Why does it so disregulate?
You can put the contour here, and you can see that it's not constrained. So you need to put constraints like how the button is positioned onto the horizontal and vertical plane. So you just select this. Yes. Yeah. And then you you can just see the XML code here, and if you want, you can modify it. Does anyone have any problems or something?
Has everyone been able to have these three buttons with different images with click events? Or you have some questions?
Where do we get those images?
Yeah, just go to slides, second link, material resources, icons. Yeah, so once again, if you go here, there are many icons, and for example, you need someone for adding. You can select any of these. You click on the icon, expand this, and download SVG. And same for map, and same for time. So for now, we have created these three buttons, which opens two different activities. One's for time, one's for map. And this one doesn't work yet. And give me a moment, I'll show you what we do next. So you see, when we click this pops out and shows and hides the buttons. So let's do how the animations work. So for this, we have two on-click listeners here, but we don't have on-click listener for just regular floating action button. So set on-click listener for this one. And inside the curly brackets, we need to write how to animate these buttons. So let's create a Boolean flag variable opens and then false. So what we do here, we set click listener on floating action button. By default, well, it's named floating action button opened, so it means that like this is opened or not opened. So by default, it's false, so it's not opened, and depending on the state of the flag, we will change the listener. What events do listener do? So if a floating action button is not opened, so we want to open it. So we change first the state to true, and then we do floating action button map animate, and we need to move it by y-axis onto vertical line. We need to move it from bottom. So for this, we need to create a value file, which is under folder values. You click on this, new values resource file, and you name it diamonds. It's not used regularly, you just do it once the file is here. And what is more, these diamonds is not that common, but just to have this nice animation, we can have it. So into diamonds, into resources, we have two diamonds, 66 and 116. So we create these two resources. You can just follow the code over here. Yeah. Right click on values, new values resource file, and just name it diamonds.xml. You don't need to make .xml, just write diamonds and click OK. Yeah, just write it. Yeah. I got a basic one. It was supposed to before I by myself. What we do here, we just create two elements named diamond, and we specify how many this diamond is big in density points. Why I do this? Because for here, I need to tell these buttons, time button and map button, how they have to be moved onto vertical basis. So they have to be moved. For example, the map button has to be moved from the bottom to the top for 66 density points, and this for 132 density points. The numbers dependent on the size of the buttons. Regularly, this button is 56 density points. Then we have 10, we just take 10 density points in between them. So that's why it's moved for 66 plus 10. And same for this, then it's moved for 132. Right? So here we do floating in main activity. Floating action button dot animate dot translation y, which is y-axis, and then we specify the resources that we have just created, the dimension, which is 66. Same we do for floating action button time. We want to have it on the very top, so we do animate translation y resources get dimension are daemon standard 160. Why we have minus here? Because it moves from the bottom to the top, because the coordinates are calculated from the top to the bottom. But we need to make it opposite. That's why we have minus here.
What's the difference between the var and the val?
That's, well, in fact, that val is the variable that never changes its value, and var is variable, actually, the thing that can be changed. Yeah, Denzel on the next session will have a around 2 hours lecture about Kotlin. He will cover this.
It's like
Yeah, exactly. Value is constant, variable is variable. So let's complete this. So once again, we have this, and we have the state of the buttons. First is Boolean and it's false. So when its buttons are not opened, and we set up a listener on this floating action button to actually be open. How we open? We just animate them. When it's opened, sorry, I'm confused. Yeah. When it's not opened, we open them. When it's opened, we have to close them. So do the opposite here. Close. Why we have this 0 here? Because we want to move the buttons to the very bottom. As you can see, initially they are hidden on the bottom. We just have actually 3 buttons and one behind other. They're all located at the bottom of the XML file. So when we click this, we move this for 66 density points on the top, and this for 132. And when we're trying to hide them, we just move them to the 0, so to the very bottom. So let's see how it looks on the emulator. It's not that one. That's one that. So the problem here is that we have specified already all the buttons and they are open by default. We have to move these 2 buttons to have the same position as the original plus button. So they will, it will hide the rest buttons, and once we click, it will flash like that. For this, we go to activity main, and we just we remove all the collections, all the linkings here. You just click cross, and you move it exactly to the same position.
Can you show that image?
Yeah, sure. I will show it once again. I'll just move it in XML files now, and then I will show it. So let me just finish this. What we actually need, we need to have these constraints to be to the bottom and to the end. So you can actually copy paste it here. So now we see that all the buttons are located at the front. Okay. Now we see that all the buttons are located at the same point, but we see that in fact we have 3 buttons. It just hides beyond each other. So let's see how it looks. So now it works. We have 3 buttons. When we click plus button, it shows the time button and map button. When we click time button, we open time activity. When we click map button, we show map activity. For this, you can see the code here. So we have around 15-20 minutes more. Regarding the coding, that's all for today. And as a homework too, you need to submit what we have done today. So you can see the instructions on the screen. In fact, we need to create time activity, map activity. We have main activity as well. To the main activity, we add 3 buttons. We add click events to the buttons that open the corresponding activities. And that's it. Push the changes to your GitHub repository and go to Moodle and submit homework too. So for that, you go to Moodle. The thing is that all your codes go to GitHub, but we need to somehow know that you are following the course. So when you go into the homework 2, at submission, in this online text, you can leave the link to your repository. If you're using the same repository, it's up to you. You can leave the link to repository again, or you can just write like, I have completed homework 2 and save changes. That's it. Yeah. Yeah, I'll come. Just let me finish with this. Just let us know that you are following the way and you're submitting the homeworks, because we need somehow to track your progress. If you have changed the repository that you have used previous time, you can leave the link here. So once again, 3 activities, 3 buttons, click events to buttons. That's it. Deadline is Tuesday 28th, which is 1 week from today. And one more technical thing. I don't remember did I told it already or not. We have phones to rent. We have laptops to rent. So if you need, just either come to us or send us email, and we can figure out how can we help it. Yeah, 1 minute, please. If you have questions, you're ready to ask.
I yesterday installed, I have installed Android Studio from my computer, and I installed a new version of Android Studio. But when I checked out my project from GitHub, it didn't show any design view or anything. And also I couldn't keep the project. So
probably some components of Android Studio are not installed. What I can offer, you can contact us and we can just agree with that week, so we can show you, we can like see what's wrong with Android Studio, or you can just try install it. The problem is can be that maybe some components of Android Studio, because if you have pushed it from the last time, all the files that are inside project have to go to GitHub. So the design views have to be in GitHub. Or another thing, try to create a new project and see if it doesn't work. It's not just contact us with your yeah. It's the thing that this diamonds it means the position in X. And when I click, it just change the orientation.
Because all these users are yeah, the thing, well, basically, it's not on just visually. There's no ready-made solution yet. If you see the calendar, several more questions?
Yes, questions.
Okay. And you see that
you can see on the screen over here that my floating action button is to the end of parent, both vertically and horizontally. So you need to have all these these parameters for all of the buttons. So all of them will be located on the button. Also, you can do it via wizard. I mean, from the visual editor, you just drag this, put to the bottom. But you see that it's a bit complicated now because I have manual buttons. Yeah, I mean, you can do this just add linkings to the right and to the bottom. And for all the buttons, the same. So that's why I'm making it here, because it's just easier to have all of them just copy and paste. So constraint has to be to the bottom of parent and to the end of parent for all the 3 buttons, like that. Yep. Any more questions?
Yes.
If you don't have any questions, we are done. If you have questions or still working on the application, you have half hour more.
yeah, sure.
Because you say you I have exposure to the background and there are particles around. I know that CSS is easily possible. So, to be honest, I managed to well, I can take a look at I mean, I only want to ask you know, I will try to take a look at it. Yes. Yes. This one, for example, this because he says he has one. But we have signed one. Just, that's okay. This,
I think that is sometimes based on the advice.
I need to fix this.
But yeah.
Yeah. Each microphone.
so let's change it to
Well, it's a fix and the phone is ready for each
Do you have any ideas why that's not good?
No, because we tried to Google it, and there was some settings that we needed to do after we did it.
Can you show the Gradle?
So how it's called is
Try to install this.
so now you have your So it was actually this
Okay. And you have one more week, so I think like from the next session we will start with like that's so we can. I mean, if you look at the next session, tomorrow, but 1 week. Yeah, like the video is here, like the video of this lab is on YouTube, so you can follow. Video, can you see your desktop? For this video. Okay, that's wonderful. So what do they do is well, for example, if we use just regular buttons, again, this are not because these were just for design. In last engineering class,
Does it matter?
Well, actually, it doesn't matter. Yeah, just trying to show them.
No, yeah. I want to do this one to be
I think she yeah, now I want to do all of them. You can just copy and paste it. I want all the
no. This one and I think it's important. No, yes, no. I had to look in versions and